Brandon Williams had been awake for 32 hours when the world tilted on him. The sun dropped low behind the glass towers, throwing gold streaks across his dusty windshield as he rubbed his eyes and forced himself to stay alert. His mother's medical bills, his brother's eviction notice, and his own rent sitting unpaid were all pressing on his chest like bricks he couldn't move. His rideshare app blinked again with its cold numbers. $0 earned today. He swallowed hard. Tonight, he had to work until his body gave out. There was no other choice. At 6:42 p.m., an unfamiliar address flashed, Rosewood Hills. The kind of place where 1 month's HOA fees equaled Brandon's entire yearly income. The kind of place where security guards followed him as if he'd stolen the air he breathed. But the fare was $18, money he desperately needed. So he accepted. As he pulled up to the towering iron gates, the guards looked at him like he had no right to exist there. After scanning his license twice, they finally waved him through with a frown. Brandon drove past marble fountains and perfectly groomed lawns until he reached a mansion that looked like it had its own weather. A young white woman in an expensive dress rushed down the steps, heels tapping sharply against the stone. "Mercy General Hospital," she said without looking up. "And step on it. I'm late." Her name showed up on Brandon's app, Emma Caldwell, as in Caldwell Industries, as in the billionaire family who owned half the medical facilities in the state. Brandon nodded. "Yes, ma'am." He merged onto the highway. Emma kept talking on her phone, fast, irritated, stressed. Brandon didn't listen until he noticed her voice suddenly falter. He glanced in the mirror. Her face had gone pale. She pressed a hand to her chest. "Ma'am, are you okay?" I'm fine," she whispered, though her fingers were trembling. "Just drive." Her phone slipped from her hand. Her eyes fluttered. Then her body went slack. "Miss Caldwell." Brandon swerved to the shoulder, heart pounding. She wasn't breathing. He fumbled for his phone, dialing 911. 911. "What's your emergency?" "My passenger." She collapsed. "She's not breathing. Please send help." "Sir, do you know CPR?" 8 minutes until the ambulance. 8 minutes Emma Caldwell didn't have. "Yes, I know it. I'll start now." He dragged her out of the car and laid her on the pavement. Cars slowed. Phones came out. People stared, but Brandon didn't care. He lined up his shaking hands and began compressions. Come on, breathe." 30 compressions. 2 breaths. His arms burned. Sweat dripped into his eyes. Her chest rose weakly, then fell still again. "Please, don't die." The distant thump of helicopter blades grew louder. Sirens echoed in the distance. But Brandon didn't stop. He pressed harder, counting under his breath, refusing to quit. And then, a furious voice tore the air apart. "Get your filthy black hands off my daughter." Brandon didn't even turn before a fist gripped his collar and yanked him backward so violently his head hit the ground. Stars burst in his vision. Towering over him was a man in a tailored suit, face twisted with rage. Richard Caldwell, billionaire, father, a man who didn't see CPR, only skin color. "Yes, sir," Brandon gasped. She wasn't breathing. "I had to." "You think I'm stupid?" Richard roared. "A black driver alone with my unconscious daughter?" "Security, restrain him." 2 guards slammed Brandon against the hood of his own car. Pain shot through his ribs. He tried to speak, but the pressure on his back kept him silent. Behind them, Emma suddenly coughed, a wet, desperate sound, and gasped for air. Richard froze. The red marks on her chest. The torn blouse from compressions. Her trembling breath. The life Brandon had fought to return to her. "Dad?" Emma whispered. Brandon lifted his head, bruised, breathless. "She's alive, because I didn't wait." Sirens shrieked. Paramedics rushed forward. A medic checked Emma's chest, then turned sharply toward Richard. "Sir," she said firmly, "this man performed CPR exactly correctly. If he hadn't acted immediately, your daughter wouldn't be breathing right now." Richard's expression collapsed. The guards loosened their grip. Brandon slid down the hood, trembling, humiliated, exhausted. Emma reached a weak hand toward her father. "Dad, he saved me." For the first time, Richard looked at Brandon, not with anger, but with a dawning horror of what he had assumed, what he had almost caused. He swallowed hard. Let him go. But the damage, physical, emotional, and moral, was already done. Brandon stood there shaking, knowing nothing in his life would ever be the same after this moment. Brandon sat in the back of the police cruiser, not arrested, but shaking from everything that had happened in the last hour. Officer Davis, an older black cop with tired eyes, stood beside him taking notes. He spoke gently, like someone who understood more than he let on. Just tell me everything exactly as it happened. Brandon did. The collapse. The CPR. The 911 call. Then Richard Caldwell arriving like an explosion. The officer closed his notebook slowly. You saved that young woman's life, son. Don't let anybody twist that. But twisting had already begun. When Brandon finally returned to his car, exhausted, he opened the rideshare app to turn his availability back on. A red banner flashed. Account suspended, investigation pending. He stared at the screen as if reading a bad dream. No income. No way to pay rent. No way to pay his mother's medicine. No way to help his brother. All because he saved someone. Brandon drove home with trembling hands, replaying everything over and over. Richard Caldwell's rage. The guards pinning him like a criminal. The humiliation. The fear. The fact that he had almost been arrested for saving a billionaire's daughter. At 6 a.m., after failing to sleep, his phone rang from an unknown number. Mr. Williams, this is Catherine from the Caldwell office. Mr. Caldwell would like to meet you today. Mercy General. Room 412. Brandon swallowed. Is Emma okay? She's recovering well because of your actions. He let out a sigh he didn't know he was holding. At 1:54 p.m., Brandon walked into Mercy General's gleaming lobby. Everything smelled like money. Marble floors polished to a shine, soft lighting, leather chairs. Nothing like the overcrowded charity clinic his mother went to. Security stopped him immediately. Can I help you? Their tone was already suspicious. I'm here to see Emma Caldwell. I was called. ID. They scanned his driver's license longer than necessary, as if checking for hidden crimes. After finally clearing him, they pointed toward the elevators with stiff gestures. 4th floor. Try not to wander. Brandon's reflection in the mirror-lined elevator looked worn, bruised, out of place. When he reached room 412, Emma lay propped on pillows, pale but awake. Her eyes lit up when she saw him. Hi. I didn't get to thank you properly yesterday. Brandon nodded. Just glad you're okay, ma'am. Before she could say more, Richard Caldwell stepped away from the window, ending a tense phone call. Mr. Williams, he said stiffly. Thank you for coming. Brandon swallowed. How is she? Expected to make a full recovery. And only because of you. Silence stretched between them. Richard's guilt hung heavy in the air. I owe you an apology, Richard said finally, voice tight. A very deep one. My reaction yesterday was unacceptable. Brandon said nothing. Richard reached into his briefcase and took out a thick envelope. I want to compensate you. $50,000. As gratitude. Brandon froze. $50,000. Enough to save everyone. His mother, his brother, himself. But something inside him refused. No, sir. I didn't do it for money. Richard blinked, stunned. I think you should reconsider your circumstances. My circumstances aren't why I saved your daughter, Brandon said softly. Emma's eyes watered. She looked ashamed on her father's behalf. Richard swallowed. Then what do you want? Brandon shook his head. I just wanted to know she's okay. He turned to leave. Wait, Emma whispered. Please stay a minute. But Brandon stepped out. The moment he reached the elevator, he finally looked at Richard's business card. A handwritten number on the back. Call anytime. He pocketed it and left. Outside, a parking ticket sat on his windshield. Brandon laughed bitterly. Of course. Back home, he sat in his dim apartment staring at the ceiling. His phone buzzed. Account still suspended. Resolution, 5 to 7 business days. 5 to 7 days. He had 2 before eviction. Another buzz. Notification, viral video. Black driver saves billionaire heiress. Gets assaulted by her father. Someone had recorded the CPR incident. Millions of views already. Brandon's face plastered everywhere. News anchors calling him a hero. Comment sections calling him a liar. Rumors. Speculation. Hate. His hands shook. He turned off his phone and buried his face in his arms. Being good had cost him everything. His mother's medicine. His brother's home. His own dignity. He had saved a life and somehow ended up drowning. The next morning, Brandon walked into the cancer ward to see his mother. The real ward, not the luxury floor Emma had. A shared room separated by thin curtains, the air sharp with disinfectant. His mother was awake, watching the news. Watching him. Baby, she whispered, reaching for his hand with trembling fingers. "You're famous." Brandon forced a weak smile. "Mama, I'm tired." She squeezed his hand. "You did good. You always do good." A billing administrator approached. Clipboard ready. Apologetic face practiced. "Miss Williams, I'm sorry, but we need to discuss your account." Brandon's stomach dropped. "The insurance from Caldwell Medical Group has denied coverage. Your mother's outstanding balance is now $48,000. Treatment will be discontinued by the end of the week." Brandon stared. "Denied? Why?" "She's been covered. A pre-existing condition clause was activated. Nothing we can do." The administrator walked away. Brandon's mother looked at him with soft eyes full of resignation. "It's okay, baby. We knew something like this might happen." "It's not okay," Brandon whispered fiercely. "I'll fix this. Somehow." His mother shook her head gently. "Miracles don't come from people like them." Brandon pulled out Richard's card. Maybe they didn't, but maybe he could force one. His chest tight, he stepped into the hallway and dialed the number on the back. Richard answered immediately. "Mr. Williams?" Brandon's jaw clenched. "My mother's treatment was denied. It's your company. Her bill is $48,000. Richard exhaled. "Give me 1 hour. I'll look into it personally." Brandon waited in his car, every second a lifetime. 53 minutes later, Richard called back. "I reviewed her file. The denial is technically correct." The world went silent. "Technically correct?" Brandon whispered. "Yes. The plan she had includes a pre-existing clause. Legally, my hands are tied. I can offer a payment arrangement." "What arrangement?" $500 per month. Brandon felt his heart collapse. $500 a month? For 8 years? My mother doesn't have 8 years. "I'm sorry, Mr. Williams. It's the best I can do within policy." Brandon closed his eyes. "You said you owed me. You said if I ever needed anything." "And I meant it," Richard replied, quieter now. "But there are procedures." Brandon cut him off, voice soft and full of pain. "You could help. You just won't." The line went quiet. Brandon whispered, "Thank you for showing me exactly what my life is worth to you." He hung up. His mother's life fading. His brother's eviction approaching. His own rent due. His job gone. Saving a billionaire's daughter had cost him everything. And no one with power cared enough to lift a finger. Brandon sat in his car outside the hospital, staring at the cracked dashboard as his mother's words echoed in his head. Miracles don't come from people like them. He wanted to argue, to believe goodness mattered, but the world kept proving her right. He had saved a life, yet everything around him was falling apart like sand slipping through his fingers. His phone buzzed. "Terrence, brother. B. Landlord moved up eviction. I have 48 hours now. I don't know what to do." Brandon closed his eyes. "I'll figure something out," he whispered. "How?" his brother had asked. Brandon didn't know, but he had to try. He pulled out Richard Caldwell's business card again, the one he had called earlier with hope in his chest. Now it felt like a reminder that rich men only helped when it cost them nothing. He shoved it back in his wallet. Hours later, a soft knock came at his apartment door. Brandon frowned. No one visited him here. "Brandon," a familiar voice called. "Please just talk to me." Emma Caldwell stood outside his worn-down building, wrapped in a soft sweater, looking fragile but determined. Her security guards hovered behind her, scanning the neighborhood anxiously. Brandon opened the door only halfway. "Miss Caldwell, why are you here?" Emma swallowed, guilt clouding her face. "I heard what happened with my father. With your mother. I'm so sorry." Brandon looked away. "Your apology doesn't change anything." "I know," she whispered. She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. "This is for your mother's treatment. It's from my personal trust fund, not my father." Brandon stared at the envelope but didn't move. "Please," Emma said softly. "You saved my life. Let me save hers." Brandon shook his head. "I don't want charity. It's not charity. It's gratitude." Brandon's voice was quiet but firm. "If I take that money, I become part of the same system that hurts people like me. I won't do it." Emma's eyes shimmered with hurt. "I'm trying to help." "Then use your privilege to change the system," Brandon said, "not to patch the holes it creates." Emma stood there, stunned. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. Finally, she whispered, "I will. I promise." But Brandon gently closed the door. He watched her walk away through the dusty window. She paused once, looking back with sadness, before her guards ushered her to a sleek black SUV. Brandon sank onto his bed, exhausted. He had turned down the only lifeline offered. Pride, principle, whatever it was, it felt like a heavy chain wrapped around his chest. He needed a miracle. Instead, he got a nightmare. The next morning, a courier knocked on his door with a stack of legal documents. "Mr. Brandon Williams? You've been served." Brandon's hands shook as he opened the envelope. Caldwell Medical Group versus Brandon Williams. Claim of negligence, unauthorized medical intervention, physical injury, emotional harm, and damages totaling $100,000. Brandon's stomach dropped. What is this?" he whispered. It felt like the ground beneath him split open. They were suing him. Suing him. For saving Emma's life. His breath caught. His vision blurred. Rage and disbelief burned through him. He dialed Richard's number with trembling fingers. When the billionaire answered, Brandon's voice cracked. "Are you actually suing me?" Richard's voice was distant, almost cold. "That is a legal department issue. It's standard procedure when injuries are involved." "Injuries?" Brandon shouted. "Those bruises were from CPR. I did everything right. The company has liability concerns." "Don't insult me," Brandon snapped. "You know exactly what's happening. I'm an easy target. Poor. Black. Visible on that video. Your lawyers know I can't fight a case like this." Silence. "They're trying to crush me," Brandon whispered. "Because I embarrassed you. Because I exposed a system you built." Richard exhaled stiffly. "This isn't personal." "It's not personal to you," Brandon said, voice shaking. "But to me, it's my entire life. His mother's treatment. His brother's home. His own record. Everything was on the line. I saved your daughter," Brandon whispered. "And you let your company destroy me." The line trembled with tension. "I think this conversation is over," Richard finally muttered. "It was over," Brandon said softly. "The moment you decided people like me don't matter." He hung up. Within hours, the story hit the news. Good Samaritan faces lawsuit after saving Heiress. The tone shifted quickly. Was his CPR too aggressive? Did he cause the injuries himself? Was he chasing attention? Did he overstep? Accusations. Doubts. Claims he was trying to profit. Brandon's rideshare account updated again. Account permanently suspended. Litigation risk too high. No job. No income. No escape. That evening, his landlord called. "Mr. Williams, after seeing the news, I can't risk keeping you here. Section 14C allows me to remove tenants involved in lawsuits. You have 72 hours to vacate." Brandon sat frozen. He had nowhere to go. He walked numbly back to the hospital, back to the only person he still had, his mother. She lay weak but awake, her hand reaching for him. "Baby, what's wrong?" He tried to speak, but broke instead. The words came out shattered. "Mama, they're suing me. I lost my job. We're being evicted. I tried so hard to do the right thing." His mother squeezed his hand, her voice soft and steady. "You saved a life. Don't let their cruelty make you cruel." Brandon buried his face against her hand and cried. He felt small, broken, defeated. An elderly woman in the next bed whispered, "We heard what happened, son. You're not alone." Another patient reached for her purse. "We don't got much, but here." She pressed $40 into his hand. The woman on the other side offered 20. The next one gave 32. Brandon stared, eyes filling. Poor women, sick women, women fighting their own battles, giving him what little they had. "You helped someone," one of them whispered. "Now let us help you." He took the money with trembling fingers. "Thank you," he whispered. But when Brandon left the hospital that night, the weight returned. $92 couldn't stop an eviction. It couldn't pay medical bills. It couldn't fight a billionaire's lawsuit. As he sat alone in his car, the world quiet around him, his phone buzzed again. Unknown number. "Brandon, this is Emma. I just learned about the lawsuit. I'm going to stop this. I promise. Please, trust me." Her message glowed on the screen. For the first time in days, Brandon let himself breathe. A little hope. A tiny flicker. A whisper in the dark. Maybe she meant it. Maybe she cared. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end. Emma Caldwell stood outside her father's office, heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. For 24 years, she had seen Richard Caldwell command boardrooms, silence executives, and bend entire industries with a single decision. But today, she wasn't here as his daughter. She was here as the woman whose life Brandon Williams saved and whose conscience wouldn't let her stay silent. She pushed open the door without knocking. Richard looked up sharply, eyebrows narrowing. "Emma, I'm in the middle of a meeting." "Hang up," she said, her voice unexpectedly steady. Something in her tone made him obey. He ended the call slowly. What is this? Emma marched to his desk and threw a folder onto it. Paper scattered. Documents, lawsuits, denied claims. Her hands trembled, but her eyes stayed firm. You're suing the man who saved my life. Richard's jaw tightened. That is a matter for the legal department. I told you. Don't use corporate excuses with me. Emma's voice cracked, emotion bubbling beneath. Brandon did CPR on me. He didn't hurt me. He didn't assault me. He gave me back my heartbeat. Richard rose from his chair. You don't understand business. No, Dad. You don't understand humanity. Silence snapped between them. You attacked him, Emma whispered. You had him restrained. You looked at his skin and saw a threat instead of the man who was fighting to keep me alive. Richard swallowed hard, but stayed silent. And when he asked you for help, real help, for his mother, you hid behind policies you wrote. Policies designed to protect you and destroy people like him. That's not fair, Richard murmured, voice strained. There are laws, liabilities. Emma slammed her hand on the desk. Stop. Richard froze. Dad, I reviewed Caldwell Medical Group's litigation history. She shoved the papers forward. 6 lawsuits. All people of color. All sued after helping someone from our family or company. All silenced. All settled quietly. Richard blinked slowly, something uncomfortable flickering across his face. This is a pattern, Emma said. And Brandon is the 7th. Richard looked away. These cases are complex. No, Emma said firmly. They're convenient. Richard shivered. You don't know how these decisions work. She took a step closer, tears gathering in her eyes. Mom taught me compassion. You taught me calculation. But calculation without compassion becomes cruelty. Richard flinched as if struck. I'm not going to let you ruin Brandon's life, Emma continued. I'm hiring a lawyer. I'm testifying for him. And if I have to expose every unethical practice your company hides behind, I will. Richard's voice softened. Emma, if you do this, the board will. I don't care. Her voice broke. I care about doing what's right. She grabbed her purse, turned, and headed for the door. Emma, Richard called weakly. Please think about our family's legacy. She stopped, just briefly. This is about our legacy, she whispered. It's just not the one you think. Then she walked out, leaving Richard in the quiet of his office, surrounded by papers that suddenly felt heavier than any deal he'd ever signed. The next day, the press conference. Brandon stood behind a podium, palms sweating, stomach tight, the room full of cameras and reporters pressing in like a wall of noise. Beside him stood Emma, steady, determined, and Sarah Chun, the lawyer who had agreed to take his case pro bono. He looked at the crowd. 3 weeks ago, he began softly, I did CPR on a passenger who stopped breathing. Her name was Emma Caldwell. Murmurs rippled. I didn't do it for money. I didn't do it for attention. I did it because someone needed help. He swallowed hard. But afterward, I was treated like a criminal. I was assaulted, restrained, doubted, and now, he held up the lawsuit. I am being sued for saving a life. Gasps. Camera flashes. This isn't just about me, Brandon continued. This is about a system that protects the powerful and punishes the rest of us. A system that takes from people who already have nothing left. Emma stepped forward, papers shaking in her hand. Brandon saved my life, she said, voice trembling but fierce. Everything he said is true. And my father's company is suing him because they care more about liability than humanity. The room erupted with questions. Emma raised her voice over them. Caldwell Medical Group denies coverage, sues helpers, protects profits. And I'm done being quiet about it. She turned to Brandon, squeezing his hand briefly. You showed me courage, she said softly. Now I'm showing the world the truth. Caldwell Industries headquarters, same day. Richard stood alone in a conference room, the board having just accused him of losing control of the narrative. Screens replayed Emma's speech on every wall. My father's company sues heroes. My father's company denied cancer treatment. My father's company puts liability above lives. Richard's face tightened. He dismissed the board and stayed alone with the silence. He replayed the CPR video, the one he had avoided watching fully. He watched it now. Brandon's hands pressing Emma's chest with precision. Brandon shaking, begging her to breathe. Brandon ignoring the stares, the risks, the danger. Brandon giving everything. Then Richard arrived in the footage, violent, Furious. Wrong. Richard's throat tightened. When did I become this man? He looked at the lawsuits spread across his desk and felt a chill. He had truly become the villain in his own story. He pulled out a letter from his late wife. He had kept it hidden for years. Wealth without compassion is just greed with a lawyer. Don't lose your heart trying to save your reputation. He pressed the letter to his forehead. Maybe Emma was right. Maybe Brandon was right. Maybe the world he built needed to be torn down. For the first time in his career, Richard Caldwell didn't know what to do. But he knew who did. He picked up his phone. Prepare a press conference, he told his assistant quietly. I'm going to fix this, all of it. And for the first time in days, Brandon felt the wind begin to shift. Just slightly. Just enough to breathe. Richard Caldwell stood backstage at the packed auditorium, palms colder than they had been in decades. Cameras, reporters, shareholders, and executives filled the seats. For the first time in his powerful, carefully controlled life, he felt exposed. Not because of business risks or market crashes, but because of truth. His daughter's truth. Brandon's truth. Truth he had ignored, denied, buried. He adjusted his tie, but his hands shook. A staff member whispered, "Sir, you're on in 30 seconds." Richard inhaled deeply. His late wife's words echoed in his ears. Compassion isn't weakness, Richard. Pride is. 20 seconds. 10. Then the stage lights bathed him in blinding white. Richard stepped to the podium. Reporters shouted questions instantly, but he raised a hand and silence fell across the room. He paused, looked at the cameras, looked at himself reflected in them. And he began. 30 years ago, I built my company to solve problems, he said quietly. Somewhere along the way, I began creating them. People leaned forward, puzzled, tense. I watched my daughter's press conference. And I need to start today by saying, she was right. About everything. Gasps rippled. Richard swallowed hard and looked straight into the cameras, his voice cracking at the edges. Brandon Williams saved my daughter's life. When I arrived at the scene, I did not see a hero. I saw a black man kneeling over my white daughter, and my first instinct was suspicion, not gratitude. A stunned silence filled the room. That was prejudice, he said bluntly. Ugly, shameful prejudice. I attacked him. I had him restrained. I accused him of things he did not and would never do. His voice trembled. I was wrong. He paused, letting the words hang, raw, unprotected. I later apologized to him, but I did not fix what my company did next. We denied his mother's medical coverage. We sued him for $100,000. We suspended his brother from work. We turned one man's courage into punishment. He exhaled, shaking. And we hid behind policies I created. He opened a folder, his hands trembling. So today, I am making things right. He read each promise slowly, clearly. Effective immediately. The lawsuit against Brandon Williams is dropped. All legal fees are covered by Caldwell Industries. His mother, Diana Williams, will receive full cancer treatment coverage, retroactive. Past medical bills forgiven. Brandon's brother, Terrence, reinstated with back pay and a promotion. Every wrongful lawsuit filed by Caldwell Medical Group in the past 5 years is reopened, NDAs lifted, victims compensated. An independent ethics board will audit every policy my company follows. And finally, a $10 million fund is being created to support patients wrongfully denied treatment. Reporters erupted with questions. Cameras flashed violently. Voices overlapped like thunder. Richard raised his hand again. This is only the beginning, he said. If I want my daughter to respect me, if I want to respect myself, I must become a man worthy of forgiveness. His voice dropped. Brandon Williams showed more humanity on that pavement than I have shown in years. It is time I learned from him. Then he stepped away from the podium and walked off stage, past stunned reporters, past whispering executives, past the world he once dominated. This time, he wasn't running from anything. He was finally facing himself. 1 hour later, the coffee shop. Brandon sat at a small table in a modest cafe, still wearing the same worn jacket and carrying the weight of impossible days. When the door opened and Richard Caldwell stepped inside, every head turned. Richard didn't bring lawyers. He didn't bring security. He came alone. He approached Brandon's table, stopped, and bowed his head slightly. "Thank you for meeting me," he said quietly. Brandon gestured for him to sit. "Why here?" Richard looked around. "You told my daughter once that this place has the best coffee. I wanted to start on your ground, not mine." Brandon studied him. Then talk. Richard placed his hands on the table, palms open. When I watched the CPR video, he began, I saw you giving my daughter everything. Your strength, your breath, your hope. And when I saw myself in that video, I didn't recognize the man I had become. Brandon stayed quiet. You showed courage without calculation, Richard continued. I spent my life calculating without compassion. Brandon's jaw clenched. Your company almost destroyed my family. I know, Richard said softly. That's why I want to give you something, not money, not charity. A chance to change the world my company helped break. He slid a folder across the table. Brandon hesitated, then opened it. Inside, a job offer. Director of Community Relations, Caldwell Foundation. 6-figure salary. Full benefits. Authority to challenge and reform company policies. Brandon looked up sharply. You think a title fixes the past? No, Richard said. Nothing can fix the past. But we can fix what comes next. And I can't do it alone. Brandon closed the folder and leaned back. Why me? Because you're everything I'm not, Richard said simply. You understand struggle. You understand injustice. And you still choose to do good. Brandon studied him for a long moment. What if I say no? Richard nodded. Then I'll accept it. But I'll still change the policies. I'll still build the fund. And I'll still spend the rest of my life fixing what I broke. He looked down, voice quiet. But I truly hope, you'll help me build something better. Brandon ran his thumb along the edge of the folder, thinking about his mother, his brother, his community, the people who had slipped through cracks someone like Richard created. Can I do it my way? Brandon asked. Richard met his eyes. Yes, even when it costs my company money. Brandon nodded slowly. I'll think about it. Richard exhaled with relief. That's all I ask. They stood. Richard extended his hand. This time, Brandon took it. Not as enemies, not as victim and offender, but as two men trying to rebuild something broken. A beginning. Not forgiveness yet, but possibility. Outside, the world buzzed with headlines, debates, outrage, praise. But inside Brandon, a new feeling flickered. Hope Point 3 months passed, and Brandon Williams hardly recognized the life he was now living. Not because luxury had suddenly replaced struggle, not because he became wealthy or famous, but because for the first time since his father died, he woke up with purpose instead of fear. The Caldwell Foundation office was modest but filled with life. On his desk sat framed photos of the community he'd begun helping. The elderly Latino woman with lupus whose claim he approved, the single father whose son received free treatment, the neighborhood kids now enrolled in CPR classes he had championed. Every stamped override on a denied claim reminded him that real change didn't come from boardrooms. It came from compassion. Brandon pressed his stamp onto a file. Approved. Humanitarian exception. BW. He wrote beneath it. Policy exists to serve people, not the other way around. A knock sounded at his door. Mr. Williams, your 2 o'clock is here, his assistant said. Send her in, Brandon replied with a smile. Emma Caldwell walked in, dressed casually in jeans and a simple top. Nothing like the polished heiress she used to be. She carried a stack of files and 2 coffees. I figured you'd need fuel, she said, handing him a cup. You figured right, Brandon replied, taking it gratefully. Emma sat across from him. The free CPR training launched in 20 new cities this morning. That's over 4,000 people trained in communities with slow ambulance response times. Brandon nodded proudly. That was your idea. You should take the credit. Emma shook her head. You pushed it forward. You kept insisting that underserved neighborhoods deserve life-saving skills too. That's you. A moment of quiet settled between them. Comfortable, sincere. Your father asked me to look at the candidates for the Medical Ethics Board, Emma added, rolling her eyes. Half of them were lawyers whose job was to protect the company, not the patients. Brandon chuckled softly. So you said no? Of course I did. She grinned. He said, good. That's why Brandon's here. He keeps us honest. Brandon shook his head slowly. I still can't believe he actually meant it. Emma leaned back. He's trying. It's not perfect, but he's trying. Brandon's phone buzzed. A message from his mother. Baby, Terrence's promotion ceremony is today. Don't forget, 4 p.m. Love you. Brandon smiled. Terrence got promoted today? Senior management. Your father made that happen, Emma said softly. But you made your father want to make it happen. Brandon paused, absorbing her words. Maybe we all helped each other, he said. Emma nodded. Maybe we did. Later that day, the ceremony. Terrence's promotion ceremony was small, held in a bright conference room at Caldwell Tech. Brandon arrived just in time, his mother beside him in her wheelchair, looking healthier than she had in years. Color had returned to her cheeks, and she held Brandon's arm proudly. Terrence stood at the front, eyes shining. When he spotted Brandon and their mother, he grinned so wide it looked like it hurt. After the ceremony, Richard Caldwell approached them, hands folded respectfully. "Mrs. Williams," he greeted gently. "It's good to see you looking so well." Brandon's mother gave a humble smile. "Thank you for helping my boys." Richard shook his head slowly. "Your son helped my family first." He turned to Brandon. "I wanted to tell you something before the news leaks tomorrow." Brandon raised a brow. "What now?" "We're opening a full-service community health center in your neighborhood," Richard said, "with low-cost treatment, CPR training, and legal aid. It will be named in honor of your family." Brandon blinked. "My family?" Richard smiled softly. "Your father, especially. From what Emma told me, he sounded like a good man. A man who believed in doing right even when the world didn't reward it." Brandon swallowed hard. His father's memory still lived in the quiet spaces of his heart. "What's the center called?" Brandon asked quietly. "The Williams Family Center for Compassionate Care," Richard said. Brandon felt something warm rise in his chest, something like healing. Opening day, 2 months later. The Williams Family Center stood proudly on a once-forgotten block in Brandon's old neighborhood. Bright murals covered the exterior wall, painted by local artists, filled with color and hope. A crowd gathered, buzzing with excitement. Neighbors, children, families, clinic staff, EMTs, volunteers. Brandon stood at the entrance beside Emma, Terrence, and their mother. He wore a simple suit, nothing flashy, but he carried himself differently now. Taller, stronger, not because he had power, but because he finally had a place where his goodness mattered. Emma handed him the ceremonial scissors. "You should cut it," she said with a warm smile. Brandon looked at the sign above the entrance. The Williams Family Center for Compassionate Care. Saving lives with dignity. He stared for a long moment. "You sure you don't want your name on this too?" he asked Emma. She shook her head gently. "My name is already in the work we did together." Brandon nodded. "Then let's open this place." He lifted the scissors. The crowd hushed. For every person who was denied care. For every family who lost someone too soon. For every life that deserves compassion, Brandon said, voice steady and strong. "This center is for you." He cut the ribbon. The crowd erupted in cheers. Tears fell down his mother's cheeks. Terrence hugged him tightly. Emma wiped her eyes. Inside the clinic, doctors greeted patients. CPR classes filled small rooms. Volunteers prepared welcome packets. A mural inside showed hands of all colors performing CPR together, symbolizing unity, dignity, and courage. Brandon stood in the lobby watching families walk in, watching lives begin to change, watching hope return to a community long forgotten. Richard Caldwell appeared quietly at the doorway, dressed simply, no entourage. He didn't try to take the spotlight. He met Brandon's eyes from across the room, nodded once, slowly, respectfully. Not friendship yet, but trust, accountability, a new beginning. Brandon nodded back. His mother wheeled beside him and whispered, "You did right, baby. You did right." And for the first time in his life, Brandon believed it. He wasn't just the man who saved a billionaire heiress on a highway. He was the man who rebuilt a system. He was the man who turned compassion into change. He was the man who proved that doing the right thing, even when it cost everything, could still change the world. Humanity didn't begin with wealth. It began with breath, with hands that refused to stop helping, with courage stronger than fear. Brandon had lost everything doing the right thing. But in the end, he gained something far greater, a legacy of compassion,